r/Nosleep. Posted by u/JLaGoodwin 1990. I collect vintage photographs. Something's off about the newest ones I bought. Part 1. Jamie, the mail's here. Mailman needs your signature for a package. I looked up at the call, a grin spreading across my face. Okay. Just tell him to give me a second. I returned my focus to the subject in front of me, pressing my eye to the viewfinder and focusing the lens. Okay, Rachel, smile and say cheese. The slightly annoyed teenager forced a smile, and I pressed down on the shutter button. Ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with photography. There was always a camera in my hands, and I was always taking pictures of something, whether it was a person, a lake, or even just an oddly bent clump of grass that intrigued me. It became such a fixation of mine that I eventually began a photography business, taking photos for people's weddings, graduations and more. It was a job I loved, and the money was far beyond adequate. And, just as importantly, it helped me fund my other obsession, collecting old photos. I love scouring sites like eBay for collections of old photographs from long ago, decades, centuries even. Especially portraits of people. For whatever reason, seeing the faces of people who have long since passed filled me with a sense of peace, as strange as that may seem. You see, I've always had this fear of, when I die, being forgotten about. Simply drifting into obscurity, with not a trace of me left. The old portraits were a reminder, a metaphorical comfort blanket. They showed me that, if these people still have some sort of mark remaining on this world, many years after their passing, then the same may eventually be true of me. And so, I became their caretaker, even opening a small gallery next door to my photography studio that people could walk through and see my collection. And for years, everything went swimmingly. Until my latest shipment came in last week. I pulled away from the tripod-mounted camera and nodded at the girl. Okay, we're all done here, I proclaimed, to which she let out a relieved sigh and shoved herself off the chair. I turned to the girl's mother, who stood beside me. Mrs. Douglas, if you'll excuse me, I need to grab that before the man gets impatient. Addie will be in here in a minute, and she'll let you know when the pictures will be ready to pick up, as well as have you pay. The haggard-looking woman gave me a thankful nod and tired smile, and I turned away, walking to the front of the studio as I heard her daughter begin to complain. Really, Mom? You needed me to take 10 pictures for a damn passport photo? I shook my head as I moved out of earshot. Some people will never like having their picture taken, no matter what it's for. Unless it's one of those ridiculous selfies, of course. Coming around the corner to the front desk, I motioned for Addie, my girlfriend and assistant, to go and finish attending to the mother and daughter, then slid behind the counter where the impatient mailman waited opposite. Afternoon, I said, trying to lighten the mood, but the poor man had clearly had a bad day. He nodded curtly, then held out a small computer terminal. Sign here, please, he said. As soon as my signature was accepted, he turned and strode out of the building, banging the glass door a little too hard. But my focus was already on the large, brown paper-wrapped package held in my grasp. I vaguely heard the mother and daughter say farewell as they exited, and distractedly raised a hand to wave to them. My attention never pulled away from it until I heard my name being called. Earth to Jamie, are there any more customers today? Giving a slightly embarrassed smile, I shook my head. Nope, those were the last. A smile of her own flicked across her face, and she turned, reaching up and locking the front door before turning the sign hanging on it from open to closed. She came over to the opposite side of the counter, leaning over it and locking her green eyes on the package in my hands. Another one, huh? She asked, shaking her head slightly as she pushed her hair behind her ear. Addie didn't exactly share my passion for old photographs. In fact, she honestly found some of them creepy as fuck, in her own words. But, because she loved me, she dealt with and put up with them. It was one of the many reasons I intended to eventually marry the woman. There weren't many like her left in the world. Well, then, let's head into the gallery and take a look at them, she declared, gesturing to the door which separated the studio and gallery. Excitedly, I led the way to the door, opening it and revealing the huge room. Photos and portraits of all sizes hung from the walls, displaying people from as far back as 2 centuries ago, to as recently as the 70s or 80s. Gruff, mustached men wearing suits stared out next to families in swimsuits beaming at the camera, providing a sort of clash between antiquity and modernity. I turned on the lights, banishing away the heavy evening shadows before moving to the large table in the middle of the room. I set the package down, a grin splitting my face as I began ripping the packaging off like I was a kid unwrapping a Christmas present. Slowly but surely, the brown paper began showing glimpses of what lay beneath. and a few moments later, I stepped back to admire my newest purchases. Wow, I breathed. Sitting on the table were two portrait-sized photographs which had been stacked on top of one another. Two black and white faces, one smiling and one not, stared up at us. The smiling face was that of a woman dressed in 50s clothing. An ornate belt was wrapped around her waist, and she had on what looked to be a white turtleneck. Her blonde hair was done up in a style similar to what the blonde bombshells of the period would have worn, and her voluptuous lips were pulled back in a genuine smile that managed to warm my heart just looking at it. For whatever reason, I almost felt transfixed staring at her. Until I heard Addie speak next to me. Ugh, wow, I was right. My eyes flickered over to the second photo, the one which had caught her attention. This one captured what appeared to be a man from the 1920s or 30s. He was dressed in a sharp-looking suit and hat, standing in front of what appeared to be some sort of factory or warehouse. He wore an almost deadly serious face, his dark, stormy eyes glaring out at the viewer with an almost insane intensity. Even though he was eternally frozen behind the glass and metal frame, he gave off a truly menacing atmosphere. I let out an astonished gasp. Sheesh. Can we say mobster, anybody? Addie snorted. Mobster serial killer is more of the apt description. It's fucking unnerving, she shivered, then looked over at the photo of the woman and let out a groan. Oh, great. And to top it off, we now have the type of woman I'd be afraid to leave you alone in a room with as well. I raised an eyebrow at her remark. Usually, Addie was one of the most confident and secure women I'd ever met. Even when other women tried making a pass at me, she usually just sat there, laughing and shaking her head at their attempts since she knew I wouldn't want her. But now, she stared at the smiling face as though she'd just met her nemesis. I was extremely grateful that she hadn't seen me become entranced over her a moment ago. She absolutely would have made you either throw it out or send it back. You're not gonna bring them back to the house to clean up, are you? She asked, sighing slightly as she already knew the answer. Yes, I replied, then gestured to the frames. The glass and frames need polishing and cleaning before I set them up here in the gallery on Monday. It'll take all weekend to get them ready. Plus, all the cleaning equipment is at home, anyways. She sighed again, resigned. Fine, just, please don't let me see them, okay babe? For my part, I simply nodded. I wanted to say more, but I knew this was just par for the course, if not a slightly more exaggerated case than normal. My phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket, and I pulled it out to look at the notification. Seeing it was from eBay, I immediately put it back. Just the notification of it being delivered. Addie spoke again. Well, if you don't mind, let's get ready to go home. It's getting late, and I was hoping we could celebrate Friday by going to that restaurant on the bay for dinner. A sly smile spread across her face. And then a little fun for dessert when we get home. I couldn't help but let out a laugh at her flirt, turning to smirk at her. Now that sounds like one hell of a plan, she laughed in return and turned, motioning for me to follow her as she headed back into the studio to shut everything down. I stood up and began to follow her. I got halfway across the room when a feeling rolled over me like a tidal wave, causing me to freeze in place. At first, I couldn't place what the feeling was, but as a shiver shot up my spine, I suddenly realized it was the feeling of being watched. I'd spent countless hours in the gallery before, and never before have I had the feeling of eyes on me like I did in that moment. What the hell? Is someone hiding in here? More than once I'd caught a few teenagers trying to hide in the gallery at night on dares from their dumbass friends in order to spend the night in the creepy gallery. Sighing, I called out over my shoulder. If anyone's in here, we're closed. Time for you to leave. Nobody answered me, but the feeling of being watched seemed to intensify. Another shiver shot up my spine as I felt a slight sense of unease fall on me. This didn't feel like a teenager. This felt like whoever was doing the staring had much more malicious intentions. Oh, shit, not a freaking burglar. A small wave of fear suddenly swept through me at the thought. I was in decent shape, but I hadn't been in a fight in a long time. The feeling suddenly crescendoed, as though whoever were doing the staring were almost directly behind me. Raw instinct took over, and I spun around, my fists swinging. Into nothing. Nobody stood behind me. My head swung like it was on a swivel, eyes darting from one side of the room to the other. Nothing moved in the room, the only sound, aside from my now heavy breathing, being the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. What the fuck? I whispered. I'd been so sure someone had been behind me. My eyes fell across the portraits on the desk. I'd placed them into holders for the moment, and both were slightly tilted up. Both the smiling woman and glowering man stared at me from across the room. I shook my head. You tired or something, Jamie? You've gotta be, if you're imagining feeling eyes on you in an empty room. Deciding I'd try and get to sleep relatively early tonight, I turned away, choosing to close the door to the gallery behind me. I spent most of the next day in the basement of our house, diligently working on getting the photos ready for their debut exhibition next week, while Addie went into town to attend the farmer's market. Each new purchase I made drew curious patrons to see what I'd found, and this was certainly going to be no exception, especially after I'd teased their arrival on social media. The feeling I'd had the other day in the gallery hadn't followed me home, thankfully. "Told you it was just you being tired," I muttered to myself as I cleaned the glass of the woman's photo. My eyes flickered to her face for a moment, then away quickly. As odd as it felt, and as, admittedly, guilty as I had started to feel, I couldn't help but become entranced by her eyes and smile every time my gaze caught it. Butterflies seemed to leap up in my stomach, as though I were a high schooler seeing my crush for the first time. It was something I hadn't felt for anyone else since I'd started dating Addie. "It's a damn picture," I said out loud. "It's not like she's still alive. So, why should I feel guilty about finding a woman beautiful who I couldn't possibly leave Addie for?" Still, I felt a twinge of shame, and turned to clean the glass of the man's picture. I didn't look at his face either, but this was for an entirely different reason. Even though he was long past harming anyone, you couldn't help but shiver at how intimidating he looked. As I leaned forward to begin cleaning the glass, I became aware of a strange, new smell filling the room. I stopped for a moment, sniffing the air. Perfume? Addie wasn't one to wear perfume much anymore, and besides, this didn't smell like the kind she'd wear for special occasions. It was powerful, almost intoxicating in its intensity. I turned around, looking over my shoulder. The single, widely spaced out lights illuminating the basement showed nobody else was down here besides me. "Maybe there's a crack in one of the basement windows that let the smell in. You've put off replacing those for almost a year, anyways." Shaking it away, I turned back to finish cleaning the glass. The smell came again after a few minutes. This time, I chose to simply ignore it, focusing, but still feeling somewhat relaxed by the pleasant aroma. I began to hum the melody of the Incubus song Drive to myself. That was when I felt the fingers brush the nape of my neck. It was only for a split second, and the sensation wasn't exactly unpleasant, like that of a lover's gentle caress. But it still caused me to let out an involuntary gasp and spin around on my stoolie. I half expected to see Addie behind me, a playful expression adorning her face from sneaking up on me. But again, nobody was there. I didn't turn back this time. Instead, my eyes peered into the far corners of the basement. The shadows were heavy there, and I couldn't see beyond 30 or 40 feet. I took a deep breath, then called out softly. Hello?" My voice sounded muted against the stone walls and floor. Silence. "You're getting jumpy again, Jamie," my mind mentally chided me. What the hell, might as well just check for peace of mind," I whispered, then stood up. I began walking towards the far end of the room, which was half concealed by shelves of cleaning supplies and boxes. "Hello, is anyone there?" I called out again, my voice a bit stronger. Again, I received no answer, but something in the air seemed to have changed. I could still smell the perfume, but the room seemed charged now somehow, as if everything in it were holding its breath and waiting for something. I took a few more steps, and then all the lights in the basement went out. I was plunged into pitch blackness, unable to keep from letting out a surprised cry. I stood there for a few moments, trying to will my breathing to slow. "It's just some sort of power outage. They happen all the time. You know this, Jamie. Just make your way to the fuse box by the stairs where the flashlight is hanging." I turned and began slowly moving in the direction I thought the stairs were. Scrape. I froze at the sound. One, I couldn't tell which direction it had come from. The seconds seemed to move by at a snail's pace. I was just beginning to tell myself that it had been nothing when the sound came again. Scrape. My mouth suddenly went dry as cotton, and I felt my heart begin to beat like a drum in my chest. The sound came a third time, just like the last two instances. I couldn't tell from where. They seemed to echo in the darkness. I forced my eyes open as far as they could go, willing them to adjust to the black. But I still saw nothing, not even the side of my nose. A fourth scrape came, and as much as I know it was a stupid decision to make, I forced my mouth open and called out, trying to make my voice sound as intimidating as possible. "Who's there?" Instantly, the scraping stopped, the basement going silent. Eerily silent. "Shit, that was a mistake, you freaking idiot." I felt like the moron in a horror movie who deserved to get murdered for that move. "If someone is in here with you, you just gave away your exact position." My breaths came slow and shallow as I tried to limit the amount of noise I made. I couldn't hear anyone else breathing in the dark, but the atmosphere in the basement had taken on an almost palpable sense of foreboding. Fear like I hadn't felt since I was a kid flooded into my system, and I slowly began to try and move for the stairwell upstairs. All I needed to do was make it to them, and then sprint up the less than a dozen steps to the door. I'd barely taken 3 steps, when 2 things happened almost simultaneously. The first was that a voice suddenly cried out into the darkness. A woman's voice, one that had a strong British accent to it, filled with a frantic panic. "Look out!" The second was the explosion of sound and movement that came from a few feet to my left. Adrenaline flooded my system as I heard the thundering sound of footsteps rushing towards me. "Shit!" I yelled out, leaping back a few feet. Something passed by in front of me, close enough that I felt the air stir. A moment later, a thundering crash came, followed by the sound of breaking glass and plastic clattering to the stone floor. Whoever it was just missed me by less than a foot. For the rest of my life, the realization I'd been that close to being ambushed will haunt me. The sound of someone trying to clamber to their feet came from my right, and a new surge of fear slammed into me. I knew that if I waited for them to get to their feet, I was not making it out of this basement alive. The woman's voice suddenly rang out again from the dark. "Run." I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted forward, praying I knew where I was going. Behind me, I heard the person who'd rushed me finally begin moving again. For a moment, I was terrified that I'd be grabbed from behind and pulled back to a horrible fate. Instead, I felt a surge of energy rush through me as I felt my feet find the steps. Not bothering to grab the banister, I tore up the stairs, my hands outstretched. Someone, what sounded like a man, swore loudly behind me. But my fingers had already found the doorknob, and I tore at it like a tiger would a slab of meat. The door flew open, and I fell forward in a heap on the kitchen floor. For a second, the wind was knocked out of me, and I lay groaning on the tile. Until I heard the sound of someone charging up the stairs after me. I leapt to my feet and slammed the door closed, locking it and yanking the key out. Not a moment too soon, either. Someone slammed violently into the other side with a great amount of force, then began hammering on it. The door shuddered with each impact, to the point I feared it'd break down at any moment. The rational side of my brain kicked in, and I turned to run for the living room where my cell phone was. "I'm calling the cops, asshole!" I screamed as I sprinted away. The pounding continued on the door for a few more moments, and then I heard the sound of someone thundering back down the basement steps as I dialed 911. As the dispatcher came on the line, an eerie silence settled over the house. I heard no sound come from inside. No sound from outside either, aside from the distant rumbling of the waves on the shore and the gentle whistle of the wind against the windows. It was only broken as I began to hear the wailing sounds of the sirens approaching. When the police arrived, I was immediately ordered to wait outside as officers swarmed in, taking the basement door key in order to gain access downstairs. For a few minutes, I heard the sounds of them shouting, ordering anyone to come out with their hands up. Then, they appeared back in the doorway, gesturing to me. "Was the storm door on the far side of the basement locked, sir?" one asked me as he led me back towards the kitchen. I racked my brain, trying to recall whether I'd bolted it the other day or not. A sinking feeling filled my stomach as I realized I hadn't, and I shook my head. "That explains where he went," then he said, then escorted me down the stairs to the basement, which now had its lights on again. The first thing I saw was the shelves which had toppled over onto their sides. Bottles and glasses of photo cleaning supplies lay shattered on the floor, along with boxes of strewn clothing and laundry detergent. The intruder crashed into here, and after trying to pursue you up the stairs, escaped out the storm door when he heard you were calling the police. I gazed at the mess, wondering how I was going to explain any of this to Addie without her freaking out when I remembered I'd forgotten to tell both the dispatcher and the officers about the woman that had warned me. But, for whatever reason, something kept me from saying anything. A thought that kept pushing forward in my mind, as much as I tried telling myself it was impossible. The officers promised me they'd sweep the surrounding forest to try and find the guy, as well as keep a squad car parked across the street for the night in case he tried to return. With a final reminder for me to lock the storm door, they left. Immediately I bolted back into the basement and locked the metal doors to the outside. Feeling a little relieved by the action, I bent down, catching my breath as I began to try and piece together what I'd say to Addie when she got home. That was when the thought had wormed its way forward again, unable to be pushed away. "No, that's absolutely freaking insane for you to think," I declared out loud. But my voice didn't sound sure. The thought kept repeating. Taking a deep breath, I walked back over to where the 2 pictures still sat on their cleaning easels. My eyes fell over the picture of the woman, and again, I felt the same pull I'd had every time I'd looked at it. But this time, a new sense of warmth flooded through me as well. I looked at the smiling face, and as much as I chided myself for even considering such an idea, I couldn't help but speak out loud. Did you warn me?" Of course, the picture didn't answer me. Nor did any voice suddenly come from behind me. In reality, it was likely that the intruder had had an accomplice, a woman that had grown a conscience and decided to alert me to the other's presence. Still, the thought remained, and I couldn't help but remember the smell of perfume and the sensation against the back of my neck. For whatever reason, it caused me to smile. That was when I looked over at the other picture. The sight of what I'd decided had to have been some kind of mobster sent a shiver through my spine, and the dark, intense glare reminded me of how I'd felt in the darkness. For a moment, the fear I'd felt returned, and then I shook my head. "You're just shaken up over what happened, Jamie, and understandably so. Don't let your imagination get the best of you." Even still, I took a drop cloth from a nearby workbench and draped it over the man's picture. I cast one last look back at the picture of the woman as I moved towards the stairs. For a moment, I swear I thought her smile widen a little, thought I saw a warm twinkle in her eyes. Then I shook my head, turning and flicking off the lights before heading quickly upstairs. I kept telling myself that, as terrifying as the experience had been, it was over. That I wouldn't have to worry about it again. I had no idea that the most terrifying and horrific things were still to come. I collect vintage photographs. Dead people aren't supposed to be able to crawl out of pictures. Part 2. To say that Addie was a bit upset about what had happened to me would be making an understatement of epic proportions. She'd been on her way home when she'd seen the deluge of cop cars pull out of our driveway and panicked, almost running our mailbox over in a frantic attempt to get up to the house. I'd been looking out of the kitchen window when I'd seen the square body Suburban we used to haul groceries and camera equipment screech to a halt in front of our garage. For the next hour we sat together in the living room, her listening as I told her what had gone down in the basement. She'd sat in silence for a time when I finished. The only sounds that could be heard were the soft pops and cracks of the flames in the fireplace, along with the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, she let out a deep breath and spoke. "So, they don't think whoever it was will come back?" She looked up at me with worried, slightly fearful eyes. I shook my head. "No, they don't. They said he'll either try and find another house to break into, or, more likely, he'll just get out the area altogether, before he's caught." She nodded, giving a small smile, but I could tell my words hadn't fully convinced her. Even still, she stood up and made both of us a drink, bringing them over before sitting down again. As the two of us slowly sipped the gin and tonics, a thought remained in the back of my mind. I hadn't told the cops about what I'd heard in the basement. But, as much as I felt hesitant, Addie was someone I didn't keep secrets from. So, after taking a particularly large pull on my drink, I sat the glass on the coffee table and leaned forward. "Addie," I began, tapping my fingers together as I tried to figure out how to say it to her. She looked at me, recognizing instantly that something was on my mind and leaning forward as well. There's one thing I didn't tell the cops." A puzzled look fell over her face. "What?" she asked. I let out a loud whoosh of air. I really don't know how to explain it, or describe it, and part of me even feels like I either had a mental break from fear down there, or I'm thinking too deep into things. I trailed off. She reached out and rested her hand on my arm. "Babe, it's okay. You know you can tell me anything, no matter how crazy you think it might sound." I couldn't help but smile slightly. "Thank God for you, Addie." I took a deep breath. When I was down there, in the dark, hearing the intruder moving around, I swear I heard someone else yell out instantly. I felt her grip on my arm tighten, and though she kept her expression level, I saw her eyes flicker towards the kitchen behind me. I continued. "Right before the guy charged me, there was another voice. A woman's voice. One that warned me about him." I shook my head slightly. "After I'd dodged him, it came again, yelling for me to run. And that wasn't the only thing. Before the lights went out, I thought I smelled perfume down there. Strong as hell." I looked up at Addie. A serious expression adorned her face now. "Do you think she was with the guy?" she asked me. "Do you think she came with him and got cold feet?" I bit my bottom lip and gently shook my head. "At first, yeah, I thought exactly that, but after the police left, I don't know." You're probably gonna find this one of the most insane things I've ever said, but I took the biggest breath of all before finishing. "I think it came from the woman in that photograph I brought home." Now came the longest pause of all. I reached out and picked up my drink again, knocking back the rest before looking over at her. I'd figured I'd see a concerned look there. I was surprised to see a thoughtful expression instead. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She stayed quiet a moment more, then answered. Honestly, Jamie, I actually don't find that far-fetched. She tapped her fingers against my arm. You want to know one of the reasons why I can't help but find many of the pictures you collect in your gallery so eerie? She asked. I nodded. I find them creepy as hell because of something I was told when I was little. My father took my mother and me on trips to South America when I was a kid, mostly to watch him work. He would go to take pictures of the areas down there for magazines. But he would always ask permission from the tribes before taking their photo. She took a sip of her drink. He told me that this was because many of them believe that cameras didn't capture only moments in time. Many tribes, and, indeed, many places around the world, believe that when a camera captures a person's image, it also captures either a piece of their soul, or all of it. That it's frozen in the developed picture for all of eternity. And, as much as I tried to tell myself that it was simply superstition, part of me always wondered if there was any truth to it. She locked eyes with me then before finishing. So, I don't think what you think is completely insane. Although, part of me almost hopes it was just an accomplice, because, the alternative almost seems worse. For a time, we simply sat in silence, staring at the fire before getting ready for bed. As I took our glasses into the kitchen, a shiver shot up my spine. I froze, slowly turning my head to look at the basement door almost directly to my right. It was firmly locked by now, the key having been taken out and hung on the hook next to it. My eyes flickered on the keyhole. For a moment, I had a strange impulse to kneel down and look into it. And I couldn't help but feel that, if I did, I'd see a night peering out at me from the other side. The fear I'd had in the dark basement returned, and another shiver rolled up my spine. I turned away, dropping the glasses in the sink before quickly walking out of the room. Addie's words had had more than a little of an effect on me. And they'd managed to stir up a thought. One that didn't involve the woman, but the glaring man in the other picture. What if, just maybe? I shook my head and climbed the stairs. Don't be stupid, Jamie, I muttered. But as I lay in bed waiting for sleep to take me, I couldn't completely banish the idea away. And when I fell asleep, it was to horrible nightmares. Nightmares of the man climbing out of the picture, a wicked smile spread across his face and bloodlust in his eyes. Sunday was a slow day, albeit a bit dreary one. Ominous-looking dark clouds had moved in, the first traces of a storm on the horizon. The reporter on the TV said that we'd be facing thunderstorms tonight, with the possibility of power outages in our area. Because of this, Addie took the Suburban into town to fill up a few gas cans to power the generator if it came to that and pick up some extra supplies, leaving me alone in the house again. Part of me felt wary about staying by myself, but I still needed to finish cleaning the photos before tomorrow's unveiling. However, I wasn't going to stay in the basement, so I elected to clean them in my home office on the ground floor. I brought them up one at a time, starting with the woman. As I set it down, the warm, entrancing feel I'd had looking at it earlier fell over me again. This time, I didn't feel apprehensive about it. I remembered Addie's words and smiled at her, drinking in her beauty. The same twinge of guilt I'd felt yesterday reared its head for a moment as I let my gaze wander over her figure, but it disappeared just as quickly. I let out a sigh of content. God, she is so stunning. The smile dropped from my face as I realized I'd left the cleaning rag hanging over the sink faucet. Damn it, I whispered, turning to go get it. But I stopped, turning back to look at the picture. I debated for a moment before looking directly into her eyes. Thank you, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. For yesterday nothing disturbed the silence, but I thought I felt the air in the room grow lighter. Smiling, I turned and went into the kitchen, retrieving the rag. As I walked back down the long hallway, however, a familiar aroma reached my nostrils. The perfume I smelled yesterday. I walked quickly into the room, a strange, ridiculous hope that I'd find her out of the picture, sitting in my cleaning chair waiting for me. But everything still looked the same. A small wave of disappointment fell over me, but I shook it away, reaching out and tapping the iPod in its dock. I worked diligently for the next 2 hours, rock and classical music spilling out from the speakers as I cleaned the glass and frame. By the time the clock displayed it was 4:30, I had removed every single streak in the glass and brought the copper frame back to its shiny original state. I took a step back and admired my handiwork. Not bad, if I do say so, myself, I thought. As I got ready to bring the picture back downstairs, the phone began ringing. I pulled the handset from its cradle, seeing Addie's cell number displayed on the caller ID. A wave of shame for making eyes at the woman's picture fell over me, and I spared a quick glance at her smile before turning my back to it and answering. Hello? Addie's voice came from the other end of the line. Hey, everything going all right back there? Yeah, Everything's quiet here, just trying to finish up the work on these 2 pictures before tomorrow, I said, reaching out and shutting the music off. Well, I got the gas, you wouldn't believe the line at the pumps for it. People are saying the power is definitely going to go out tonight, so glad you said to get it. I'm about to head in and grab some food and other supplies from Walmart now, so I should be home in about an hour to an hour and a half. The smell of perfume seemed to intensify in the room, and I felt myself relax into the chair. Addie said something else, but it sounded far away, as though she were speaking through a wall. A sudden chill rolled up my spine as I swear I felt the same sensation of fingers tracing along the back of my neck, along with the soft, warm feeling of being breathed on. I spun around in my seat, half expecting to find a pair of eyes and smile right in my face. Nothing was there. The woman still smiled from the photo. But something seemed to have changed. I leaned forward, squinting. Wait a minute, I swear her eyes were looking more to the right. Or, were they always looking more in the direction I'm sitting? Jamie. The yelling voice emanating from the phone in my hand snapped me out of my stupor, and I pressed it to my ear again. Yeah, I'm here, I said quickly. For a moment, there was silence on the line before she spoke. Are you okay, babe? You sound, I don't know, distracted or something. I ran a hand over my face, rubbing my eyes and sighing. Yeah, I think so, I finally answered. I think what happened yesterday is still under my skin a bit, and I'm just off, if that makes sense. I heard her sigh on the other end of the line as well. Yeah, I've felt the same way. I've actually been thinking. After you debut those photos tomorrow, you wanna take a vacation for a week, just to unwind from that? I was thinking about having us drive down to Bodega Bay. You always said you wanted to visit the filming locations from the birds. After all, for a moment, I thought. Part of me still felt entranced by the sensation I'd now felt twice. But I shook my head. Honestly, a vacation sounds freaking perfect. We'll figure it out when you get home, okay? She agreed, and after a quick I love you, hung up. I replaced the phone in its cradle, looking out the window facing the ocean. The clouds loomed almost directly over the house. Storm's almost here. Then I turned back to the picture. My head still felt a little fuzzy, and I struggled to place what the 2 identical sensations had felt like. It almost feels like I was trying to be seduced. Shaking my head, I picked up the picture and brought it back downstairs. I eyed the other picture, still covered with the drop cloth. A part of me didn't even want to touch the thing. There's no way out of it, you've got to get it cleaned before tomorrow, I said to myself. However, I kept it covered, picking the whole thing up and carrying it upstairs. Setting it down on the easel, I took a deep breath before pulling the cloth off. Immediately, I felt myself tense up. What? I breathed out. I leaned forward, blinking my eyes to make sure I wasn't seeing things. I wasn't. When I'd last looked at the picture of the man, he'd been standing in a confident pose, his eyes glaring towards the top left corner of the photo, his striped suit buttoned up and looking like $1,000,000. Now, though, the picture had changed. The suit was no longer buttoned up. It had been undone, revealing the vest he wore underneath. It also revealed something else. I felt a chill shoot up my spine as I saw the knife sheathed on his hip. From the current angle, I couldn't tell its exact size, but it looked lethal enough. That wasn't the part that made my breathing suddenly quicken. Part of me wished I was wrong, that I was imagining things. But his eyes had changed. They were now staring straight out of the photo. Directly at me. Fucking hell, I managed out, standing up and backing away from the picture. My mind raced as I tried to comprehend. Dots connected. I knew now that I hadn't been crazy. I had seen the woman's eyes in a different position before. This is, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Both of them can move in their pictures? How in the hell is this even possible? I know Addie spoke about pictures capturing people's souls, but how could they move in them? No other photos I've ever dealt with have done this. What kind of power does it take to make this possible? Then my mind stopped. My breathing began to come in short, ragged gasps as I attempted to push away the thought worming its way to the forefront of my mind. But try as hard as I might to divert it, it still came forward. And the single question filled with as much terror and fear as I'd felt yesterday. Can they climb out of the pictures? My mind flashed back to the black basement. That was an intruder last night, right? I asked myself out loud, my voice wavering slightly. Nobody answered thankfully, but the mental images burning themselves into my head were elevating the fear surging through me. Images of the man climbing out of the photo in the dark, grinning evilly as he crept towards me. Oh, hell no. As I stared at the picture, a thought suddenly occurred to me. Justin. Justin was one of my oldest friends, someone who I'd known since I was little. A goofball like myself, we always got into trouble until we were young adults. I also remembered that his mother was more than a little into things like the occult. If anybody would know anything about things of this nature, it'd be her. I snatched my cell phone off the desk next to me, making sure to keep an eye on the glowering figure in the picture as I turned on the screen. The first thing I saw was another email notification from eBay, the second one I'd seen since yesterday. Flicking it away, I opened the Messenger app and began typing a text to my friend. "Hey dude, this may sound like a weird request coming from me, but could you ask your mother something? Could you ask her about pictures? Specifically about people who can move in pictures, or even crawl out of them?" I put the phone in my lap and kept my eyes trained on the man. Every fiber of my being was telling me to get out of the room now, screaming, actually. My phone vibrated, and I let out a relieved sigh as I snatched it up. "Never expected that from you, dude, especially where you never believed in that sort of thing. Any reason why you're asking? Hope you and Daddy are battened down for the storm coming, it's about to be a doozy." Almost as if his text had summoned it, I heard the rumble of thunder come from outside, signaling the storm was minutes away. I typed back quickly. "As nuts as it may seem, I may be dealing with something like it. Just please ask, and quickly." I put the phone down again and stared at the picture. As I did, the fear remained. But, something else began to well up inside of me. A feeling I hadn't felt as strongly since my school days. Anger. When I'd been a young teenager, I'd often end up bullied by the older kids for so many damn things. For wearing glasses. For being into reading books. For liking history. I'd be picked on, beaten the shit out of and threatened by them. The fear I felt from the picture brought back the horrible memories of being cornered in the gym locker room, and as much as I knew it was a massively different situation, it still felt the same. The man in the picture felt like a much worse version of those bullies. And one thing I grew to hate feeling, was afraid. Rage now began to boil in my blood, and I turned to glare back at the picture. Spittle began to fly from my mouth as I spoke to the photo. "You know what? I really don't know if I'm fucking nuts or not, but just on the off chance I'm not, and you can actually move in there and hear me, if you were the one who attacked me last night. Fuck you, buddy. Yeah, you heard me right. Fuck you. And you know what else? I'm not fucking afraid of your goon, mafia ass. You're nothing more than a piece of shit. And you're fucking long dead too." Let's not forget that one. I drew in a deep breath, righteous anger spilling out of me. A thought suddenly swam forward in my head as I remembered seeing the email notification, and my lips curled into an angry, vengeful smile. "And you know what, to top it off? I'm not keeping you. Tomorrow, I'm gonna try and return you to the person I bought you from. I'm only gonna keep the woman's picture. And if they won't take you back, you know where you're going? Straight into the fucking dump. So put that in your fucking pipe and smoke it, asshole." Vaguely, I felt the phone vibrate in my lap again. But I wasn't paying attention. I kept grinning at the picture, now feeling like I had the upper hand. Deciding I didn't want to be in the room anymore, I stood up, flipping the man the bird before turning and striding towards the open door. I was halfway through the doorway when it came. Wham! I can still perfectly remember that sound. The sound of something slamming into the wall, almost directly next to my head. I froze in mid-stride, all of the righteous, vengeful anger I'd been feeling suddenly dropping out of my body like it was a sieve. The fear which had dulled returned in spades, and I felt chill after chill run up my spine, as if I were being doused in ice water. Slowly, I turned my head to the right. My eyes suddenly went wide as they found the source of the noise. I gasped, suddenly moving rapidly backwards to slam into the side of the doorway. My heart began to thunder in my chest, and I felt my blood turn to ice. Embedded in the doorframe, less than a foot from where my head had been, was perhaps the most sinister knife I'd ever seen in my life. The solid silver blade glinted wickedly in the overhead lights, and the obsidian black handle vibrated back and forth from the force of the throw. Realization suddenly crashed into me like a truck as I recognized where I'd seen that handle. Swallowing hard, I slowly turned to look back into the room, at the picture. If I hadn't felt breathless, I probably would have screamed. The picture had changed again. The sheath the knife had been set in now sat on the man's waist, empty and unsnapped. The right hand was clenched into a fist, the veins on the hand looking like they were bulging out. But the worst part was his face. The regular glare that had always been there was gone. Now, his face held an expression of absolute murderous rage on it. The eyes smoldered, looking black as coal now. I managed to whimper out 3 words. "Fuck me, man, it might have been a trick of the light, but I swear I saw a corner of the man's mouth curl up ever so slightly into a smirk at my words. I didn't wait to see any longer. I snatched for the door handle, yanking the door closed as hard as I could. I snatched for the key that hung from a nail on the wall, jamming it into the lock and turning it. As soon as I was certain it was locked, I turned and walked quickly down the hallway. Coming around the corner into the kitchen, I fought to catch my breath. What the actual fuck just happened in there? I knew immediately that I couldn't keep that photo in the house any longer. I wasn't completely sure if the man could actually come out of the picture, or just interact with the world like he just had. I wasn't sure if they could be seen moving, or worked on some Doctor Who Weeping Angels type shit. Either way, that picture couldn't even stay the rest of the night in the house. It needed to get taken and dumped tonight. Soon as Addie comes back with the Suburban, I'm going to help her unload the stuff, and then I'm going to cover the picture up again and stuff it face down in the back. I'll tie it down and drive, not to the dump, but to the damn ocean. I'm throwing it into the churning sea and letting it sink into the fucking abyss. I've seen too many horror movies to wait. Fuck this shit, dude. Light suddenly blazed through the kitchen window, rolling across the kitchen from right to left. My eyes flew up, and I felt a surge of joy and hope flow through me as I saw the truck pull up in front of the garage. Not a freaking moment too soon, I muttered, then ran for the side door. As I sped past the basement door, for a moment, I thought I heard something come from behind it. A woman's voice. But I didn't stop to listen. I tore open the door, banging open the screen door and jogging for the truck. Lightning flashed, suddenly turning the world from night to day for a moment, and the wind whipped fiercely around me. Addie leapt out of the truck, slamming the driver's door and turning to give me a smile. Just in time. I need help getting all this inside. I forced a smile back, not allowing her to see how freaked out I really was. Sounds like a plan. Why don't you take the supplies into the house, and I'll take the gas into the garage to the generator. She nodded and began to turn away when I touched her arm. By the way, after we get this unloaded, I'm taking the truck for a few minutes. Confusion spread across her face. Where are you going? She asked, having to raise her voice as another rumble of thunder came. Just to quickly take care of something. I'll tell you later. I half yelled back. The perplexed look remained on her face, but she nodded and walked to the back of the truck. Swinging open the rear barn doors, she grabbed the 2 bags of food and supplies and headed for the open kitchen door. As soon as she did, I grabbed the first 2 of 4 cans of gas and walked them into the garage, setting them down next to the large, hulking shape of the generator. As I began walking back to the truck, my cell phone began to frantically vibrate. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Surprise filled me as I saw Justin's name displayed. I didn't think he'd call me, just text me. Shrugging to myself, I tapped the accept button and put the phone to my ear. Hey, man, I didn't think you'd ring me up, I said, walking to the truck and opening the driver's door. The wind was too loud now to hear him speak, but sitting in the truck would dull the sound enough. Hauling myself inside, I slammed the door shut and leaned back in the seat. Did you hear me, man? I heard him ask. An odd feeling came over me at his tone. Why the hell does he sound so panicked? No, I was out in the wind. What did you say? I said, please, for the love of God, tell me you were joking about dealing with the whole people moving in their pictures thing. Now I definitely knew something was wrong. His tone was dead serious and he'd almost pleaded the last sentence. Dread began to form a pit in my stomach. Justin, what the hell is it, man? I demanded. He answered before my sentence was even finished. I just got done speaking with Mom, and she almost flipped when I told her you'd said something about it. She got white as a sheet and almost fainted. A shiver ran up my spine. What the hell did she say? I almost yelled into the phone. The words that replied chilled me to the bone. Mom said she's only heard rumors about things like that. She told me that it takes a metric fuck ton of black magic to pull something like that off. It basically means either willingly splintering a piece of your soul from your body, or cursing someone to be bound to a picture forever as torture. You don't age, you don't die, and you can hear and see everything around you. But you cannot get away from the picture. The only way to break that curse is to destroy the picture and frame its in itself. I felt my blood chill in my veins. Oh, shit. I forced myself to not panic, keeping my mind thinking as slow as I could. Can they interact with people and things outside of their pictures? I asked, trying to will my voice to remain calm. Yes, Justin answered. Mom said they can physically interact with the world around the picture. It's just that they don't like showing themselves unless they want to. Or they're trying for something. My eyes grew wide. What would they be trying for? I heard a deep breath on the other end of the line. Jamie, think, man. People in old photographs are usually long dead, right? What do you think they want? They want life. But the way the spell works, unless you have an extremely powerful witch or warlock, and pray if you meet one of them that they like you, is that you have to make a trade. Someone gets stuck forever in the picture, and you can leave, living the remaining years they would have. I gasped. You mean they possess you or something? No, he answered, they don't get your body, it's not like body swapping. They come out looking exactly like they did in the picture, and you get trapped in it. My mind was now picking up speed, putting the dots together. The woman, trapped unwillingly. That's why she's been trying to help me. And him, he willingly split his soul to live forever. And now, he wants out. A final question bubbled forward, the one I'd thought of earlier, but had been too afraid to wonder. Now, I forced myself to ask it. Justin, I need to ask you one final question. Silence came from his end of the line as he waited for me to speak. I forced a shaking breath out. Can they climb out of the pictures they're in? For a few seconds, there was silence, and then he answered, uttering only a single word. Yes. Horror like I'd never felt in my life smashed into me with the one word. I knew for sure now that there had been no burglar in my basement yesterday. It had been something much, much worse. And if it hadn't been for the woman warning me, I'd be trapped in that picture in the basement right now. I'd have been trapped down there when Addie. My heart almost stopped as I realized that my girlfriend was alone in the house right now. It didn't matter that the door to my office was locked, she was in the house with that thing alone. Justin, I gotta go, man, I said quickly, then ended the call before he could say anything. Pushing open the driver's door against the now howling wind, I leapt out and began running for the door, wishing for the first time in my life that we weren't so far from the nearest neighbors. Addie, I shouted as I charged for the door into the kitchen. No one answered me, and I took the steps to the screen door two at a time, ripping it open and shoving the kitchen door open. As I flew inside, I froze as a sound suddenly reached my ears. Screaming, Addie! I screamed, sprinting through the kitchen into the living room. Leaping over the couch, I skidded into the hallway to my office, slamming my shoulder into the wall. At the end of the hall, I saw a crumpled figure and ran to it as fast as I could. As I drew closer, I saw it was Addie. And, to my relief, she was alive. I dropped to my knees next to her, about to ask her if she was okay. But the look on her face closed my throat up. Her face had gone as wide as a sheet, and her eyes, seeming almost delirious with fear, were wide. But they weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. A chill shot up my spine, and slowly, I turned to look behind me. What I saw will stay with me forever. I've had nothing but nightmares since that night, seeing the same horrifying, sanity-tearing image. And I'll likely have them the rest of my life. The door to my office had been unlocked and opened. By Addie or something else, I'll never know. But I had a clear view straight into the room. Straight to the picture. Dead people aren't supposed to be able to crawl out of pictures. They're not supposed to be able to climb out of them. That's what my mind repeated to itself over and over. The glaring man in the picture was decades dead, if not closer to a half a century. And he had pulled himself halfway out of the picture. Thick, meaty hands gripped the frame for purchase as he attempted to pull himself out completely. The fedora he'd been wearing had fallen to the floor of my office, laying face up. Slicked back black hair covered his head. The brown, almost black eyes glared out at us, at me. The mouth was curled into a cruel smirk as he watched me start to tug on Addie, trying to drag her away. And then he spoke, his voice deep and low. Hello Jamie. I collect vintage photographs. I made a horrible mistake. Final. Addie, for the love of God, move. For a moment, she didn't move, rooted to the spot by a combination of shock and terror. Completely understandable, given that we were watching someone climb out of a fucking photograph. But then, as the man began to pull one of his legs through to place on the floor, she snapped out of it, stumbling to her feet as I pulled her down the hallway. Behind us, I heard the man's cruel voice spill out of my office. So, you were gonna either send me back or toss me in the dump, eh? You and me, we're gonna have words about that, buddy. He let out a laugh, one that sounded as insane and cruel as his smirk had looked. And then we were turning into the kitchen. With each step, Addie found her feet, and began to run on her own. As she did, she turned to me, her eyes wide. Jamie, what the fuck is going on? She screamed. I'll explain later, I shouted back as I heard a crashing sound come from the hallway. As we passed by the door to the basement, the voice I'd heard on the way in came again. The woman's voice. It was much louder now, as if she were shouting, but the door muffled her words and made them indistinguishable. I saw Addie shoot a shocked look at the door, but I was lunging for the door outside. Ripping it open, I grabbed her by the arm and pulled her outside. The rain had begun to fall, and droplets smashed into our faces as I led the way towards the Suburban in the driveway. Tearing the driver's door open, I pushed Addie towards it, hurrying her as I shot frantic glances over my shoulder. The open kitchen doorway remained empty for the moment, but I knew that wouldn't last long. Hauling myself into the driver's seat, I slammed the door shut and locked it before reaching for the ignition. Shit. The ignition slot was empty, the keys not there. Addie, where are the keys? I said, a small note of desperation entering my voice. Her face immediately paled. I took them inside with me when I got home. I hung them up on the hooks in the front hall before I had a chance to let out any expletives at being so stupid as to not check. Her face, if possible, went even paler. Her eyes widened as she stared out the windshield. Oh, fuck, I spun around in my seat, my eyes finding what she'd seen. Oh, fuck. The man was free from the picture. He stood in the doorway, staring out at us. The cruel smirk was still plastered on his face, and he'd replaced his hat on top of his head. For a moment, he simply stood there, seeming to drink in the moment. Then, he began to descend the stairs. You gotta do something, man. You can't stay in here. If he traps us in here, we're dead. For the first time in my life, I wished I hadn't been the one of my friend group to stay out of trouble or keep out of illegal shit. Knowing how to hotwire a car would have come in handy in this moment. I turned to Addie. We've got to get back into the house and get the keys, I exclaimed, looking back to see the man had halved the distance to us. Rain now dribbled down from the brim of his hat, obscuring his face. Lightning flashed for a moment, and a wave of horror fell over me as I saw the glint of the knife that he'd thrown at me in his hand. But how are we gonna get back inside? Addie asked frantically. We're gonna jump out of the passenger door and make a run around to the front door. I never locked it. Then we grab the keys and make it back here. Once we do, we floor it. I saw her nod, then pull back, gasping loudly. Clink. 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 It was the sound of something tapping against the window. Metal on glass. Reach behind you and unlock the door, I whispered as quietly as I could to her. The man's voice, muffled behind the glass, came from behind me. Unlock the door, you too. You've got nowhere to go. I saw Addie slowly reach behind her, trying to keep her movements small enough to not be noticed. I refused to look behind me. The tapping came again. It'll be a lot easier on you two if you unlock the door. I get nasty when people don't do as I tell them. A chill ran through me at the man's words. The psycho is literally telling us that he'll kill us quickly if we unlock the door. Then, barely audible over the tapping and the rain drumming on the roof of the truck, I heard the sound of the passenger door unlocking as Addie pulled up on it. Fine, have it your way. Two things happened simultaneously. The first was that behind me came the sound of shattering glass. I felt the shard smack into my back, along with the cold sting of pouring rain. The second was that I yelled, "Go!" Before the word was completely out of my mouth, Addie had already yanked on the door handle and leapt out into the night. I heard the man curse as he saw what we were doing, but I had already scooted across the bench seat and leapt out after her. "Run!" I shouted. But she didn't need my encouragement. She was already dashing for the front of the house. Rain slashed my face as I fought to keep up with her. Behind me, I heard the slam of a car door and shot a look over my shoulder. A fresh surge of adrenaline filled me as I saw the man rounding the back of the Suburban. A murderous rage now filled the bit of his face I could see below the brim of his hat, and he walked quickly after us, almost in a run. I turned back, almost running into Addie's back as she snatched the front steps railing, hauling herself up as I pushed her to go quicker. A moment later, we flew through the front door, slamming it shut behind us and locking it. "Lock the side door," I shouted as I ran to grab the car keys off their hook. I dashed behind her back into the kitchen in what felt like a horror movie version of Ring Around the Rosie. But as I rounded the corner, I almost slammed into her back. I was about to ask her why she'd stopped when I saw why. Shit. The man stood near the bottom of the steps, looking in at us. He laughed. "You ain't getting out this way," he declared, almost triumphantly. My mind raced, trying to figure out a plan. "If you go the other way, or try and run upstairs, he'll be on you before you get 20 feet. You've got to find a way to put a barrier between you and him." As I fought to figure out what to do, I saw the man begin to ascend the stairs. We had less than 10 seconds to do something. That was when the idea flashed through my mind. My eyes flickered to the basement door. The key still hung on the nail next to it. And the door could be locked from either side. I didn't wait. I leapt towards the door, snatching the key from the hook and twisting the handle. The door flew open, revealing the dark steps downward. "Come on," I yelled, reaching behind me for Addie. The man suddenly let out a roar of anger, hidden behind the open door. "Don't you fucking dare." Addie raced through the door and down the stairs as I yanked the door closed. Jamming the key into the lock, I fumbled for a second as I heard the rumble of running footsteps approaching the door. Then came the reassuring click of the door locking. Not a moment too soon, either. Before I'd even yanked the key from the lock, the door began to violently rattle on its hinges. Then it began to shudder as the man began to ram into it from the other side. "Get down the stairs," I hissed behind me. I heard Addie descend into the dark, and I followed after her quickly. "Okay, you bought yourself a little time to figure out what to do next." For a few moments, we huddled together in the dark. I heard the rattle of Addie's breathing as she fought to catch her breath. I heard a similar sound coming from my own mouth. And then I froze, feeling as rooted to the ground as a statue. Because I heard the soft sound of someone else breathing. Someone that wasn't either of us. Addie stiffened in my arms, signaling she'd heard it at the same time I had. Above us, the pounding on the door continued, beginning to blend in with the drumming of the rain against the roof and windows. Neither of us dared say anything. For a few moments, the basement remained silent. And then a voice spoke out from the darkness a few feet in front of us. "Thank God you two managed to get away from him instantly." I recognized the British accent as the same one I'd heard the other night. "The woman." I swallowed, managing to find my voice. "It's you, isn't it?" I said, meaning it more like a statement than a question. "Yes," came the reply, the voice seemingly filled with warmth and safety. "What the hell?" Addie managed out, her voice barely coming above a whisper. The woman's voice came again. "Oh, my goodness, I am so stupid. She must be terrified hearing me right now. Hold on a moment and let me find the lights." A few seconds later, the basement lights flashed on, momentarily blinding us. As I blinked away the blue spots in front of my eyes, I heard Addie gasp and looked up. The woman stood at the bottom of the basement steps, having reached up to flick on the light switch. After standing there a moment, she stepped down, moving back into the center of the room. She looked exactly as she had when she'd been in her picture, wearing the white turtleneck with the ornate belt around her waist above a pair of black slacks and high heels. Eyes as blue as the ocean looked over the two of us, and she smiled. For a split second, the same feeling I'd had in front of her picture before returned, and I almost felt like I was falling under a spell. Then she spoke again, snapping me out of it. "Hello, Jamie. It's nice to finally be able to meet you." Her smile widened a little. Then, she looked over to Addie. "And you must be Addie." Before I could say anything, Addie spoke up. "Who the hell are you, and what the hell is going on right now? How are you able to climb out of your picture? And who the fuck is the psycho trying to break the door down up there?" The woman raised her hands in a placating manner. "Easy, dear, easy. I'm not here to hurt you." She spared a quick glance up at the door, still rattling. "My name is Nadine, and I've been trapped in that picture by him for a long time." She let out a sigh, her head dropping as she looked at the ground. There was silence for a few moments. "For how long?" I asked. "Since 1955, she replied, still looking at the ground as she picked at her belt. "I met him at a party at the Savoy Hotel in London. I was there to receive an award for my career as an up-and-coming actress when he approached me at the bar. I remember being charmed by him. He was so suave and debonair, seeming confident and a little bit of a bad boy. And he made me laugh. All the things I can't resist in a man." She looked up again, and I could see the pain in her eyes as she continued. "My husband had just left me for another woman, and I was vulnerable. He could tell that and took advantage of it. The next thing I know, we're in a room in the hotel in the throes of passion. For a moment, I thought I might have found someone new. Someone I could move on with. But I didn't know what he had planned for me." Her voice choked off, and I saw tears begin to fall from her eyes. She wiped them away with the back of her hand. Addie spoke up again. "So he trapped you in that picture?" she asked. Nadine nodded. "The same night, when I tried to return to the award party, he started saying these strange words in another language, one I'd never heard before. The next thing I knew, I was trapped inside a picture, forced to stare out and smile. But inside, I was screaming. Especially when my friends came in looking for me. They even turned and saw me in the picture, making a comment about how they were surprised the hotel had already put up a portrait of me." She sniffed again. "I've spent what feels like an eternity staring out of that prison." She motioned to the now empty picture behind her, watching the world pass by, seeing the people I loved grow old and die. And then be moved around the world, boxed up in the dark and be presented by others. It was only a few decades ago I found I could move, even leave the picture temporarily. But I could never truly escape. Because he sealed himself in a picture as well. The two of us were always sold together, as a collection. So he could stay close to his prisoner. His prize. As long as he exists, I remain trapped. A mixture of sympathy and horror flooded through me as I pictured what she must have endured for what was close to 70 years. Watching everyone she knew grow old and pass, watch the world she knew fade away and be replaced. Wanting to scream, but never being able to. And always being glared at by that evil man. I heard Addie let out a gasp. "Nadine, I'm so sorry," she managed out, sounding on the verge of tears herself. Nadine looked as though she were about to speak when the biggest crash against the basement door came, along with the sound of splintering wood. All three of us swung our gazes up the stairs, seeing the door now beginning to buckle under the weight of the attacks. She turned back to us, pointing behind us. "You two need to get out of here while you still can." I turned and mentally smacked my head as I realized I'd forgotten all about the storm doors to the backyard. I turned back to her. "But what about you?" Another pained expression crossed her face. "My fate has already been made. Yours hasn't. You still have a chance to make it out of this." She took a few steps forward until she stood directly in front of us. The smell of her perfume again filled my nostrils as she reached out and stroked my cheek. Then she looked at Addie. "You're a truly lucky woman to have such a wonderful man by your side, dear. I envy you. Don't ever take him for granted." She turned away. "Now go." I stood, unsure about what to do as I heard the basement door splinter again. The man's muffled shouts filtered down to us. But, surprisingly, it wasn't me who spoke first. It was Addie. "Jamie, we can't leave her like this," she whispered to me, her face a clear portrait of remorse for Nadine's situation. "What the hell can we do, though?" I asked her. "We're about a minute from ending up on the sharp end of the mobster's knife, and I stopped, mid-sentence as something swam forward in my head. The words that Justin had told me. The only way to break the curse is to destroy the picture and frame it's in. "Addie, I know how to do it," I exclaimed. Nadine turned to look at me, and I could see she'd been silently crying. "Do what?" she asked. "Break the curse and free you. My friend who knows about this kind of occult magic told me. If I destroy the empty picture and frame, it'll destroy him. And that will set you free." Addie tightened her grip on my arm. "Jamie, are you sure you're right?" I looked down at her and shrugged. "I honestly don't know. But it's the best chance we've got, not only at surviving this, but helping her." I pointed to Nadine, who began to open her mouth to protest. But Addie spoke up. "Nadine, don't argue, we're helping you if we can." The blue eyes began to water over with tears again, this time of relief and happiness instead of sadness. "We need to find a way to get around him and get to the picture. Then destroy it," I said. A light seemed to flash in Addie's eyes. "I have an idea on how to destroy it," she said. "Okay, then I'll be the one to try and distract him," I volunteered. A look of worry flashed in Nadine's eyes. "Jamie, he's dangerous, you have to be careful. One wrong move and he'll gut you where you stand." Her words sent a chill up my spine, but I did my best to force it away. "Then we'll have to make sure that doesn't happen, do we?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Addie, get out the storm door and make your way around and inside. Do what you need to do. I'll keep him off you." Hands grabbed my face, and I was pulled downward. Addie pressed her lips to mine in a quick, passionate embrace. "Don't you dare get dead on me," she demanded, her face set in a look of determination. I nodded at her, then jerked my head at the storm doors. "Now, go." She didn't say another word, turning and running for the steps. There was a squeak, and suddenly the sounding of the pouring rain became deafening. Then they shut again. A split second later, the basement door didn't just break down. It disintegrated. I ran to Nadine's side, looking up and trying to will myself to be brave. But all I felt as I looked up the stairs was terrified out of my wits. The man's silhouette was framed in the doorway as he glared down at us. "I see you've been talking with the harlot here, haven't you?" he snarled as he took a step down. Nadine suddenly spoke up. "Leave him alone, you bloody spiv," she yelled. The man laughed, the boom of it seeming to rattle the windows. "You like that, wouldn't you, Nadine?" he asked, smirking cruelly at her. He looked back at me. "What's she been telling you, I wonder?" The knife glinted in the light over him, the blade looking sharp and wicked as he flashed it at me. Suddenly, Nadine turned and pushed me with more strength than I imagined she'd have. "Run, Jamie!" she screamed. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and bolted for the storm doors. Behind me, I heard an explosion of movement as the man gave pursuit. "Get back here, you little shit!" "We're not done talking yet," he yelled. But I'd already reached the doors, pushing up on them. They flung open into the night, and I began to race up when a stabbing pain surged through my leg. I yelled as I fell half out into the mud and water that had become the backyard. Turning to look back, I saw immediately what had happened. Blood flowed out of a large slash in the back of my right calf, dripping down onto the stone steps. The look of insane rage and cruel satisfaction that adorned the man's face as he moved up after me, along with the sight of my own blood dripping from the knife's blade, is something I'll never forget. I screamed, adrenaline flooding my system once more as I lashed out with my uninjured leg. For a moment, I was terrified that my foot would simply pass through him like he was air. But to my relief, it didn't. I felt my boot connect solidly with the man's nose, felt it crack and break under my weight. He let out a shout of pain and tumbled backwards down the stairs. I staggered to my feet, terrified at how close I'd come to dying, and looked down into the basement. The man was struggling to get to his feet. "That's it, you impetulant little fuck. I'm done playing nice," he screamed. Behind him, I suddenly saw movement as Nadine flung herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Run!" She screamed again at me as the man attempted to throw her off. I took the moment of distraction and half ran, half limped away through the backyard. The back of the garage came into view, and I rounded the side of the house as I heard the man roar in rage, almost inhuman in its intensity. The terror it filled me with provided me with the energy to stagger around to the still open kitchen door. Flying up the steps, I entered the kitchen and shouted, "Addie, where are you?" A call came from back near the living room, and I moved towards the door to it. "Hurry, Jamie," came Nadine's voice from the open basement door. I spared a glance down it as I passed, catching a glimpse of her terrified face looking up at me. A large welt had been dealt to the side of her face, and I felt a surge of rage well up inside me at the sight of it. "You're not getting away from me again, Jamie," thundered the man from behind me. I felt the house shake as he entered the kitchen again. But I was already entering the living room, seeing Addie standing by the fireplace holding the empty picture. The flames still roared inside of it, letting out loud pops and crackles. "Yes," I shouted, gesturing to the fireplace. But as the words left my lips, horror suddenly filled every fiber of my being as I saw a hand fly from the doorway behind Addie, grabbing her by the scruff of the neck. "Oh, no you don't, you dumb bitch. You have no idea what you're doing," Addie screamed, dropping the picture as she was yanked back. "Addie!" I screamed, horrified I'd see the man drag the knife across her throat before I could reach her. The picture crashed to the floor, the glass spiderwebbing and smashing. The man suddenly let go of Addie, who collapsed to the floor in a heap as he let out a high-pitched scream of pain. For a microsecond, I stared, then realized what had happened. She dropped the picture, and when the glass broke, it hurt him. What Justin said is true. A new wave of determination filled me as I saw Addie look up at me from the ground. "Destroy it, Jamie," she screamed as I saw the man begin to enter the living room. I staggered forward and snatched up the picture as he turned to look at me. I raised the picture over my head, seeing the look of rage give way to one of panic and horror. He dropped the knife, raising his hands in almost a pleading manner. But I wasn't waiting to hear what he had to say. "Go to hell, you piece of shit," I shouted at him, bringing the frame down as hard as I could on the stone around the fireplace. The ornate frame splintered and smashed, shattering into many pieces that fell to the floor. The man suddenly doubled over, letting out another scream of pain. The picture began to flutter to the ground and I snatched it out of the air, turning to look into the flames. "No!" I heard the man scream behind me. I felt a meaty hand brush against the back of my neck. But I'd already thrown the picture, along with remnants of the frame, into the fire. As soon as the flames touched them, he let out the most horrid, painful scream I've ever heard in my life. I whirled around to a sight I'll never be able to forget, that of him standing there, screaming as flames seemed to leap up from nowhere and cover him. They didn't seem to transfer from his body to the carpet, only sticking to his body. I dashed for Addie, dropping down next to her and gathering her in my arms as we watched in horror, unable to look away as the man who'd tried to kill us burned. Until he fell to the floor, the flames growing larger and consuming him. A few moments later, they went out, leaving no trace of them or the man on the floor. The two of us sat there, staring at the now empty floor for a few minutes and breathing deeply before Addie spoke. Is it over?" she asked weakly, rubbing the back of her neck where she'd been grabbed. I let out a shaky breath. "I think so," I said, swallowing and putting my face in my hands. Suddenly, I felt her stiffen against me. "Nadine!" she exclaimed. I looked up, realization filling me as well. I got to my feet, picking her up and guiding her to the couch. "Wait here, I'm gonna go check." She slumped onto the couch, looking up at me and nodding before rubbing her hands over her face. I turned and limped through the living room into the kitchen, approaching the basement door. "Nadine." There was no answer, and I moved the basement door, looking down. No one approached the base of the stairs. "Nadine, we did it," I called. There was still no answer. What happened? Did she move on or something? I called out one final time, this time softer. "Nadine?" The scent of perfume suddenly filled my nostrils, and I became aware of someone standing almost directly behind me. "Thank you, Jamie," came her voice from just behind my left shoulder. A smile began to spread across my face, and I opened my mouth to reply when she continued. "Thank you ever so much, darling. I've been trying to get rid of him for far too long now." My mouth snapped shut as I heard the tone in her voice change. There was still a trace of the warmth in it, but it was almost masked behind what I could only describe as coldness. "What the? Thanks to you, now I'm free." A chill ran up my spine as the feelings of fear and horror began to return, along with a new emotion, dread. I slowly began to turn to look at her when I felt something smash into the back of my skull. I fell to my knees, darkness rapidly filling my vision. In the distance, growing fainter, I heard Addie call my name. Then I heard her scream. The last thing I heard before falling unconscious was Nadine say one final thing. "For the record, Jamie darling, I do truly like you. And I don't share the men I like." When I woke up, it was to blinding sunlight filtering in through the open kitchen door. The back of my head throbbed with pain, and I felt a large bump as I reached a hand back to rub it. For a moment, nothing came to my brain. And then, everything that had happened smashed into me. I scrambled to my feet, looking around. I was alone in the kitchen. "Addie?" I shouted, praying that I would get a response. Nobody answered my call. Horror and dread like I'd never felt surged through me as I ran through the house screaming my girlfriend's name. But I found no trace of her at all. As I entered the kitchen again, I glanced out the open door. My Suburban was gone, the driveway empty. Wait a minute, who took the truck, Addie or? Another thought flashed into my head, and I suddenly turned and bolted down the basement steps. "Nadine!" I screamed out, my voice filled with a mixture of fear and anger. I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked around. "Naughty." The word died in my throat as my eyes locked on the empty picture across from me. Well, not entirely empty, anymore. There were two new things that occupied it now. A scream of horror bubbled up in my throat as I saw the bloody handprint smearing down on the far wall. And just below it, right at the edge of the picture, was a hand and arm that lay palm up on the floor. One that I knew intimately well. Tears flowed freely from my eyes as I stared at Addie's bloody arm, the rest of her body stretching out of sight of the area the picture captured. I reached out, hoping I'd meld into it, be able to reach in and pull her out. But my hands simply touched solid glass. For a time, I stood there, crying. Then I turned and dashed back upstairs, racing around until I found my cell phone in the office hallway where I'd dropped it. I snatched it up, flicking open the screen. I didn't know who I planned to call, whether it was Justin or the police. I'll never know, because my eyes were drawn to the deluge of email notifications that filled my screen. They were all from eBay. All from a user I didn't recognize. And they'd all been sent in the last 8 hours. My shaking fingers tapped the newest message, and the eBay app opened to it. It was a private message titled "The pictures you purchased, urgent, read now." My eyes flickered over the message written to me. A new sense of dread began to fill me as I reread the message, then opened the next. It was the same. I felt my heart begin to thunder in my chest and my breath grow ragged. And then I was dashing out the door, limping for the garage where my motorcycle sat. That morning was 2 days ago now. My fingers are beginning to shake as I type this out, remembering the words that had been sent to me. "Look, I've been trying to get a hold of you for the last few days. I don't know if you're ignoring them or simply not getting them, but you need to read this. What I'm about to tell you might sound insane, but it's true. The pictures you bought? I used to own them. My brother ended up selling them months ago without my knowing. He hated them, but he didn't know why I held on to them despite everyone's protests. The two people in the pictures, the woman and the man? They're not just pictures. The people in them can actually move around and climb out of them. I found it out a few weeks after buying them myself, hearing voices and coming downstairs to find them out. I don't have time to fully explain, but I need to warn you before it's too late. The woman, Nadine? She's not to be trusted. She'll tell you that the man trapped her in the picture and is keeping her there. She's half telling the truth. The man is keeping her trapped in her picture. But that's because she's dangerous. I don't know what she is, A demon, a witch. But she's evil beyond measure. She's able to seduce and entrance any man that comes her way. The man was part of an order dedicated to hunting down and trapping people and things like her. He sacrificed a piece of his soul half a century ago to entrust she remains trapped in that picture for eternity. He may be rough, but listen to him. He'll tell you how to stay safe. Just don't cross him. If he thinks you're trying to free her, he will attack you. Do not believe any of Nadine's words. She was an actress in her old life. She knows how to fake emotions to get what she wants. And what she wants is to be free. She wants to be able to spread her evil across the world again. She has powers beyond your imagination. And whatever you do, for God's sake don't get her attention. She'll let you live if she truly likes you. But if she does, and you have a girlfriend or wife, she'll kill them to have you to herself. Message me back as soon as possible. I'd like to buy them back from you, to keep people safe from them, from her. That email will haunt me for the rest of my life. What have I done? What have I unknowingly unleashed upon the world? I don't know what to do, if there's anything I can do. I can't call the police. What would I tell them? That a woman crawled out of a picture, murdered my girlfriend and stuffed her body into the picture she'd been trapped in before escaping? I'd be institutionalized in a heartbeat. I am so sorry. I am so sorry to everyone. To Addie, oh, God, Addie, I thought I was doing the right thing, I thought I was helping someone. I'm terrified now. Terrified that Nadine may come back at any time. Terrified of what she'll say. What she'll do, regardless of whether she likes me or not. Terrified the most that she'll be able to entrance and seduce me fully under her spell, like she was already able to do before. That she'll make me forget about Addie and everything else. But, beyond that, I'm most terrified of what she's doing in the world now. What she's planning. And that's why I've written this, to warn all of you while I still can. Regardless of whether you believe me or not. If you're out and about, and you happen to see a stunningly beautiful woman with blonde hair and ocean blue eyes, whether she's still dressed in the 1950s clothing she had on that night, or has changed her outfit and hair to blend into the modern world, if you see her, smell her perfume and feel entranced by her eyes and smile, run. Run, while you still can. Especially because of one thing. One horrifying thing that chills my blood with the implications. Nadine has many powers, as the man in the email said. And one of them makes me want to scream uncontrollably when I think about what I found at my gallery, the door hanging open and swinging in the breeze. All of the pictures on the walls were empty,